There's a good chance that if you guys have been following this channel, that you are in need of some cornerstone assets because you're building out a rebuild, a productive struggle, a one-year punt. Maybe your team is in a house money year. Either way, I'm going to break down all of my top 15 cornerstone rankings by position. I'm not going to go super in depth with these names, just kind of outline the landscape, the trade value of these guys, and kind of where the tiers stack up. So if you enjoy this video at any point, as always, leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you guys play Dynasty and are new around here. Now let's hit the intro. All right, before we get into it, we got to define what a cornerstone player is. On our site on Flock Fantasy, you guys can see that we have this little age slider that you can kind of adjust the age of the position that you're looking at. So what we're going to be doing in today's video is breaking down my cornerstone quarterbacks, which are quarterbacks who are 28 years old or younger, my cornerstone running backs, 24 years old or younger, my cornerstone wide receivers, 26 or younger, and my cornerstone tight ends, 27 or younger. At these ages for these various positions, you still have a 3 to 5 year window with those players for the most part. So that's kind of the window that we're going to be projecting for these guys. Cornerstone assets, if you're building out a rebuild or a productive struggle. If you're not ready to compete for a year or two, it's not going to be a big deal. They're not the type of assets that are going to sink in value, and you need that production right away. So we're going to start off with the quarterback position. I'm kind of going to go, like I said, just kind of rapid fire through the tiers, not necessarily break down the bull and bear case for every single player. But you guys can see the cornerstone rankings on the screen. And thankfully at quarterback, I mean, most of these guys are under the age of 28. We are just spoiled by high-end quarterbacks around the NFL right now that are young, in their prime type of guys. The only guy that is in my top, 15 to 17 overall rankings that doesn't make this list is Dak Prescott, who's 30 years old. So he's the only one that's outside of this cornerstone ranking. But you guys can see in that 4 first-rounders plus tier, Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen, they're getting to the age 28 type of range. They're 27 years old. Jalen Hurts and Joe Burrow in the next tier down. Justin Herbert, Lamar Jackson, and Trevor Lawrence. These 7 quarterbacks, to me, all the top picks. If you're in a super flex startup draft, all of these guys are extremely, extremely valuable on the open market. It should cost an arm and a leg, an overpay, to go out and acquire these guys in trades. With Mahomes, with Allen, with Burrow, with Herbert, and with Lawrence, you're getting potential high-end passing ceilings. And then, of course, with Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson, and to a degree, Josh Allen as well, you're getting that rushing upside. You're getting the upside of, 1,000 yards, 800 yards, 10 touchdowns on the ground. The next tier down, we have Deshaun Watson, Justin Fields, and Kyler Murray. All of these guys are basically just kind of 1B to the high-end tier of quarterbacks. They're not quite worth the same amount because we have question marks about, Deshaun Watson being able to bounce back. Kyler Murray's got the ACL tear. Justin Fields, still not a proven passer, but when these guys are on, they could absolutely hit the high-end range of outcomes that any one of those quarterbacks going before them can hit. Next, we have the tier of the top 2 rookies, which is Bryce Young and Anthony Richardson. We've broken these guys down ad nauseum pretty much the entire offseason, but Bryce Young, I see a very similar career trajectory to a Deshaun Watson, a guy that can ascend as one of the best young quarterbacks in the NFL. Not the best talent around him in the world, but it's definitely better than some of the other first overall picks have had to deal with. Anthony Richardson dealing with a pretty good situation, I would say, relative to his skill set. He's the type of guy that needs good coaching. He's going to need weapons around him, going to need offensive line protection, going to need a good run game. And he has all of that in Indianapolis. They've done a good job building a nest to drop a young quarterback into. Anthony Richardson, also very valuable on the open market right now. I probably would say I'm a little bit lower on him relative to some people. I've seen some people want to take him over Watson, over Murray, over Bryce Young especially. But for me, I think he slides right behind those guys, just given the risk that we know he has with his profile. Then finally, to close out this top 15, we have the guys that kind of round it out, which are CJ Stroud, Tua Tagovailoa, and Daniel Jones. All 3 of these guys have some question marks. CJ Stroud, of the 3 rookies, probably has the lowest ceiling and also probably went to the worst landing spot there in Houston. Not a lot of talent around him. Pretty shaky franchise in general. They also traded up for Will Anderson, sacrificing their first-round pick next year. So there's a little bit of questions behind CJ Stroud and how they're going to build around him, but he was a good prospect. He's a guy that I still believe in. Tua Tagovailoa, if it wasn't for the injuries, you could make the argument he's up there in the Justin Fields, Deshaun Watson, Kyler Murray area because of what he showed and because of the talent that is around him. He pretty much led the NFL in yards per attempt last year. So he definitely has a high passing ceiling. We just have a question mark about the injuries. And then Daniel Jones, for me, it's a little bit more on-field play perspective. He had a good season last year, definitely his best season as a pro. But will he continue that momentum? Will he continue to get better as a quarterback? He did show a lot of that mobility that we like to see, though. So that is the top 15 Cornerstone quarterback rankings. Again, I went rapid fire. I wasn't necessarily trying to go in depth with these guys. And also, you guys probably know that all these guys are top quarterbacks anyway. So I wanted to spend more time on the running back, the wide receiver, and the tight end position. So the running backs, you guys can see, are 24 years or younger. So nobody go to the comment section and yell at me for not having Christian McCaffrey or Saquon Barkley on here. They don't meet the cornerstone criteria. If you draft those guys, they're not cornerstone assets. You need to win if you are holding those players on your roster. These are players that you can hold on your roster for more than a year, more than 2 years, and they'll still be viable assets. Although I will say, when it comes to rebuilding and building out a productive struggle, usually you don't want to have any running backs on your team until you're ready to compete or at least be a house money contender. But the first tier is obviously Bijan Robinson in a tier of his own, worth about 3 first-rounders in Superflex formats. Then we get down to Breece Hall, Jonathan Taylor, and Jahmyr Gibbs. These top 4 guys are the cornerstone assets, I would say, at running back. That's probably the only ones that there are in Dynasty because the position is so scarce. There's not a lot of young, up-and-coming, talented guys that don't have a lot of question marks, because a lot of the guys I'm going to get into after these guys have a lot of question marks. There's a lot wrong with their situations, whether it's injury, whether it's workload, whether it's they're getting up there in age, whatever the case is. Bijan Robinson's going to get every amount of work under the sun as a top 10 pick, most talented prospect we've seen since Saquon Barkley. Breece Hall, Jonathan Taylor, and Jahmyr Gibbs, I'll give you something a little bit different. If Breece Hall had not torn his ACL, he'd be right in there with Bijan Robinson as a guy just 22 years old, showed a lot of promise his rookie season before tearing his knee up. Of course, now we have to worry about if he's going to make a full recovery. Jahmyr Gibbs, top 12 pick. He's obviously going to be very valuable going to an offense with a top offensive line, top 5 scoring offense in the NFL last year. He kind of just inherits DeAndre Swift's role. And then Jonathan Taylor on the tail end of this cornerstone range, because he is 24 years old. I think he's not the type of guy I would want to build around. If I had Jonathan Taylor, I think he's closer to Saquon Barkley, closer to Christian McCaffrey in terms of, cornerstone running backs. He's more so of like a win now guy, but he is still in the age criteria for a cornerstone player. Travis Etienne and Kenneth Walker are the next tier for me, who are worth about a mid-first rounder each. Both of them have their question marks. They're both going to be in split backfields, but they both are immensely talented. So it's very difficult because in today's NFL, the way that we look at fantasy football, we want Travis Etienne to get everything under the sun. We want Kenneth Walker to get everything under the sun. That's just simply not how NFL teams think anymore. Not many teams are going to give you the most workload that you can possibly get. Travis Etienne is probably going to split goal line work, probably going to split early down work with Tank Bigsby, but we can hope he takes a step forward in the receiving department. I think the Jags are going to be one of the best offenses in the league. So it's nice to be tethered to that. Same goes for Kenneth Walker. I think they're probably going to stick to the run game a little bit more this year. And Kenneth Walker can kind of be the new Nick Chubb, where Zach Charbonnet is the new Kareem Hunt. He's a little bit more of a pest than we want him to be, but Kenneth Walker can be efficient. He can get those touchdowns. He can break off long runs. And the Seahawks offense should be pretty good with the receiver core that they have, with the way Geno Smith played last year, and the 2-headed backfield that they have there. It's a good offense. I want pieces of it. So I've seen Kenneth Walker drop a lot in dynasty startup drafts since Zach Charbonnet was added. And I think he's actually quite a good value, because we're going to see once he gets back on the field that he's going to be efficient. He's not going to have a top 3, top 5 ceiling like we once thought, because, he's not the best receiving back in the world and Charbonnet is going to eat into his workload. But I do think he's going to be very efficient, low end RB1 type of guy for the duration of his rookie contract. Next, we get into the tier of late first round assets who all have kind of question marks around them. Javonte Williams, Dameon Pierce, J.K. Dobbins. Javonte Williams, it is completely injury related. He is coming off of a multi-ligament ACL tear, ironically in the same tier as J.K. Dobbins, who was coming off of that injury last year. Javonte Williams will be entering his 3rd season this year and has never really commanded a full workload. Even going back to his days at North Carolina, he was splitting time with Michael Carter. His first year, he split time with Melvin Gordon. His first year, or his second year before the ACL tear, he was splitting some time as well. So with Javonte Williams, you just have a question mark of how much can this guy actually carry, especially if he's going to be coming off of an injury this year. But if he misses the pup, if he's not, completely useless for the first 6 weeks of the year, he could definitely rise in value by midseason. Dameon Pierce is a 4th round running back, so we have job security question marks long term. But he did show to be very talented. And that's really the thing that you want to hold on to with Dameon Pierce if you have him. Is that he's, a 23-year-old running back who's a very talented, pure runner, kind of like the new Chris Carson. Probably only going to have like a 3 to 4 year shelf life. He's probably not going to be into his late 20s performing like an elite running back, but I do think he can be an RB2 for the duration of his rookie contract. Even if they were to add some competition, I think Dameon Pierce is good enough to still command a pretty solid workload. And then J.K. Dobbins, I think, will be a big bounce back candidate this year. So this is kind of like a projection here. He hasn't quite earned this yet, but he was very efficient as a rookie. He was very efficient post week 12, week 13, when he came back from his injury fully healthy last year. It's unfortunate that he suffered an ACL tear in his second season, because we could have been talking about a guy, who had a top 12 season his second year, maybe a top 8 season his third year, and be ready to explode this year, but not the case with the injuries. So hopefully he can bounce back. The Ravens offense should be a lot better. Hopefully Lamar can stay on the field. Then we get into the next tier of running backs, which is, again, just a real talent kind of pool here with DeAndre Swift, who we know is talented but has had trouble staying healthy. Zach Charbonnet, who I loved coming out this past year, but goes to a situation where he's going to be behind Kenneth Walker. And then we have Devon Achane, who has a lot of raw physical ability, but not necessarily the most refined runner in the world. But he did go probably to the best landing spot he could have went to. So all three of these guys do have question marks about, I would say workload is their big question mark, because Swift has never commanded a big workload. And when he did, he got injured. Now he goes to Philadelphia. They like to deploy a committee approach. I think he can be efficient. I think he can be like a 50% snap share back. But if anybody is projecting him to be like an 80, 90% bell cow, I just don't think that's realistic for Swift anymore. I think he would have done that already to this point in his career if he was going to be able to do that eventually. And then Zach Charbonnet, probably the best handcuff in fantasy now going forward. With Kenneth Walker, we know Charbonnet can catch the ball. He can work in on passing downs, so probably work in on early downs as well. If anything happens to Walker, he's obviously going to be very, very valuable. But, come his third season, maybe Walker moves on in free agency, and that's when we really get true Zach Charbonnet, at his peak. And then Devon Achane, like I said, he's going to be efficient in that offense, but I don't expect him to get more than 10, 15, 18 touches a game at most. Hopefully he gets high value touches like we get from Austin Eckler in Los Angeles. He gets, red zone work. He gets, pass catching work, but they do have a lot of running backs there in Miami. So Achane, more of a dynasty best ball type of asset in my opinion, but I do think he is still very valuable because the splash plays will be there. He was very high on the Devy and Dynasty radar. So people are going to want to believe about Devon Achane. So I can't, completely sink him in my rankings for that reason. Next, we get down to the final tier of the cornerstone running backs, which is Rachaad White, Isaiah Pacheco, and Cam Akers. All three of these guys have even more question marks than the previous guys there. Rachaad White, not a very efficient runner last year. They didn't really add anybody. Sean Tucker was the only guy that they really added to this backfield as a UDFA. But even Sean Tucker, I think, is a better early down runner than Rachaad White. I think he's going to work more as like a pass catching specialist. And that's definitely not a bad thing, because I do think this offense is not going to be very good. The offensive line's a little bit shaky. There could be a lot of checkdowns. So Rachaad White's interesting, but I do think if I got a bunch of spike weeks out of him early in the season, I would definitely be looking to cash out for a first rounder if I can. He's a little bit older for a guy that's just going into his second season as well. And I don't think long-term job security is something that I would bank for Rachaad White. I think he's in a similar boat to Dameon Pierce, even though he's a third-round pick as opposed to a fourth-round pick. And the same could be said for Isaiah Pacheco, because this year I think he's a great projection because we have the Chiefs offense. He looks to be the early down guy, the bell cow on the goal line, and that's going to be very valuable in that offense. But he's a seventh-round running back. He runs really hard. He could definitely deal with some injuries. Probably doesn't have a long shelf life in the NFL. So I think a 1 to 2 year window is a good projection for Isaiah Pacheco. And if I drafted him for a productive struggle, I would be looking to cash out at some point, mitigate that risk, turn him into a draft pick. But if he fell for whatever reason in your startup draft, or if you just roster him, definitely look for selling windows with Isaiah Pacheco. And same goes for Cam Akers, who's ironically only 23 years old still. It seems like he's much older than that, but he was very young coming out. Now fully healthy, 2 years removed from the Achilles tear. We saw him finish the season very strong, including an RB1 overall finish in week 16 this past year. I think he can command a workload. They didn't really add a whole lot there in Los Angeles. Just Zach Evans was added on late day 3. So I actually really like Cam Akers as a low risk, kind of high upside, like RB3 to have if you're, trying to rebuild the team and you're looking to cash out midseason, or if you're even a contender and you wanted to buy low on like some RB2 production. I think both, scenarios kind of play itself out. So like I said, with running backs, you're not necessarily looking to build around this position because they don't have a long shelf life. We like to build out, going back to the video that we did on Sunday, the number one rebuild strategy. We like to build out our teams based on, strong quarterback play and strong wide receiver play, strong tight end play. And then by the time our team is ready to compete, we probably have a lot of draft picks. We can just spend those draft picks on rookie running backs and get them for when they're best, which is their rookie contract, not necessarily the guys that I talked about on this list who are in their first, second, third, fourth seasons in the NFL, even though they're still younger. So those are the cornerstone running backs. Even though, like I said, we don't typically want to build around that position, you still want to know, if you're in a 3-4 year window, who are the best guys to have. Wide receivers, let's move on to that position. 26 or younger was the criteria I chose for cornerstone assets. So obviously the top guys are the top guys. Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, in whichever order you want to have them. 3 first-round picks is the price tag to move off of these guys. They're both extremely, extremely talented, extremely, extremely valuable on the open market, and both should be the top 2 picks, in my opinion, in one quarterback formats as well. And I would say 3 first-rounders, probably not even enough in that type of format. Next, we get down into the next tier, which is CeeDee Lamb, A.J. Brown, Garrett Wilson, and Chris Olave, who are valued as like 2 random first rounders. I will say that I generally think that CeeDee Lamb and AJ Brown should be a slight notch ahead of these guys, but the market right now is highly valuing Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave based on the prospect profiles they had, based on the rookie season outputs that they showcased. They probably should have been number 1 and number 2 in offensive rookie of the year discussions. And those guys are very good cornerstone assets, right? Like if I'm building a team and I can't get Chase or Jefferson, and even more so, honestly, if I'm building out like a punt and I'm trying to tank, Olave and Garrett Wilson won't produce to the level of Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson. But long-term, once they're 24, 25 years old, they might be at that level based on the 1 year of information and their college profiles. It looks very good for them to be very, very productive receivers in the NFL for a long time. Then we have a slight tier behind. I view these guys all kind of similarly, from CeeDee Lamb all the way down to Drake London, but there is a slight difference on the market right now. 2 mid to late first rounders is about the price tag for Jalen Waddle, for Amon-Ra St. Brown, for T. Higgins, and for Drake London. All of these guys are strong options. Jalen Waddle, a very efficient receiver, but not necessarily the highest volume play. Amon-Ra St. Brown, high volume, but not necessarily a guy that we're going to buy into long term, because Jared Goff, we don't know what his situation is. Amon-Ra St. Brown, a PPR monster, a great receiver, clearly, but a guy that we somewhat worry about. Is he quite as good as some of the guys going ahead of him? T. Higgins, also very strong, very good, but he is in the same offense as Jamar Chase. That's always going to hold him back in people's minds in trade negotiations, although I don't think it should, because we've seen him finish as a wide receiver 1 twice alongside Jamar Chase, especially if you just remove the games last year where he was leaving early with injury. He produced still like a wide receiver 1. And then Drake London, a bit of a projection here, but he's 21 years old. He just had a 30% target share his rookie season. And if the Falcons don't pass the ball at a historically low rate, Drake London's going to have a monster breakout season this year. And if he does, he can ascend all the way up to like dynasty wide receiver 3, dynasty wide receiver 4 in overall rankings as young as he is. So definitely a very strong asset himself. Next, we get down to the 1 mid first rounder plus tier, which is Devontae Smith, DK Metcalf, Jackson Smith-Njigba, and I also group Jordan Addison into this territory as well. Ideally, if you're in a rebuild, if you're in a productive struggle, you're going to have these guys as like your wide receiver 2, your wide receiver 3, and you're going to have more of the guys that I've already talked about. But I do think these guys are still great cornerstone assets to build around and build out the depth of your wide receiver core. DK Metcalf is closest, I would say, I think, of anybody on this list to being older than 26. So he's bordering on the range of not necessarily a cornerstone asset anymore, more of a contending asset, as is AJ Brown. But I will say he's still a very strong cornerstone asset to build around. Devontae Smith, still very young, has some bias around him because he plays with AJ Brown. And we don't know what the future holds, but Devontae Smith, we know, is a great receiver because he literally just posted a top 12 season in points per game as a second-year player, playing alongside a top 5 receiver in points per game. Very, very impressive. Jackson Smith-Njigba, high-level prospect, goes to the Seattle Seahawks. Crowded situation year 1, but I think with Jackson Smith-Njigba, we're going to see great peripherals. We're going to see a great target share, good targets per route run, probably a couple splash games here and there. One of the premier guys, I would say, if you're tanking, to go after, because he'll probably rise in value no matter what, unless he just has a completely awful rookie season. He's also not the type of guy who's going to score a ton of fantasy points his rookie year as well. So if you're trying to tank for Caleb Williams, if you're trying to, tear it down and get as many high draft picks as you can, Jackson Smith-Njigba, a great option to go after. And then Jordan Addison as well, probably more productive than Jackson Smith-Njigba their rookie seasons. I would definitely rank Jordan Addison from a redraft perspective over Jackson Smith-Njigba, but I do think, given that he plays with Justin Jefferson, we know that he's going to always be viewed as a number 2 receiver, and it's always going to kind of hold his value back. Therefore, he's probably going to be a good value, just like T. Higgins has been, just like Devontae Smith has been most of their careers. And I love Jordan Addison as a wide receiver 3 in a rebuild type of situation. Then we get down to the next tier of receivers, which, again, more so you want these guys to be depth in your rebuild, not necessarily your wide receiver 1. Brandon Ayuk, Jerry Jeudy, Jahan Dotson, Christian Watson, a couple other names were just after this area and would be in the same tier, like Michael Pittman Jr. and some other guys like that. But these guys are the ones that I think are the premier guys. Brandon Ayuk, a guy that's been very productive the first 3 years of his career, been a top 36 receiver every single season, including 18th overall as a rookie. Doghouse year 2, and he was still very productive. And then year 3 finishes as a wide receiver 2, alongside Deebo Samuel, alongside George Kittle. He has a contract situation coming up. He's on his 5th-year option. And he's going to be playing for a new contract. Maybe the 49ers could deal him. We don't know what the future holds for Ayuk. What I do know about Ayuk is that he's 25 years old and he's very, very talented. So he's the guy that I think is also a very good premier, rebuilding depth wide receiver. Jerry Jeudy could be in for a huge breakout season this year if Russell Wilson can take a step forward, if Russell Wilson can get back to Russell Wilson of old, and Sean Payton can bring that out in him. So I like Jerry Jeudy a lot in rebuilds as a guy that you could potentially flip mid-season for way more, or a guy to just build around for the future. Same goes for Jahan Dotson. Also going to get the stigma of he's a number 2 receiver because he plays behind Terry McLaurin, but he showed quite a bit as a rookie, very high level production in reception perception, separating versus man, zone, and press like a madman. Love Jahan Dotson up here. Same goes for Christian Watson. Highly efficient rookie season. Some, inconsistent play here and there, some drops, but I do think he can take a big step forward this year and hopefully become Jordan Love's go-to guy. That was the wide receiver cornerstone rankings. Again, all of these guys I would be very happy to have on a rebuild. And again, please do not go down to the comments and ask me where Tyreek Hill is or where Stephon Diggs is. You needed to be 26 or younger to qualify for this list as a cornerstone asset. Now let's close this video out with the tight end position. 27 or younger is the threshold I've chosen because tight ends generally take a little bit of time to develop, and they usually can play into their late 20s, into their early 30s without a problem. Perfect example of that being, some of the guys we've seen over the past couple of years, Jared Cook, Zach Ertz, obviously Travis Kelce, who's a future Hall of Famer. All of those guys have been able to play into their 30s. The top guys at the tight end position, Kyle Pitts is still the tight end 1 in Dynasty. 2 mid-first rounders is the price tag. I used kind of like a tight end premium, a 1.5 tight end premium scale for this position. Otherwise, they would be very undervalued. But if you don't play in tight end premium, I would say kind of just downtick this a little bit. Kyle Pitts, a guy that, again, very good rebuilding asset because the position takes a while to develop. We don't know how much the Falcons are going to throw the ball next year, but Kyle Pitts, if they decide to start throwing the ball more, is a hyper-talented guy. 1,000 yards as a rookie, very high-level production as a rookie tight end, which we never see, and he's immensely talented, 6'6", runs in the 4.4s. Kyle Pitts is a guy that has a chance, if he has a great season this year, to be untouchable on the market, right? If we see it, if he's a top 2 overall tight end 1 season this year, he could definitely be untouchable on the market, especially in tight end premium leagues. Mark Andrews, by the skin of his teeth, is still 27 years old. I view him more as a contending asset, but he does technically still fit the bill for a cornerstone tight end. Although if you were tearing it down or if you drafted a productive struggle in a startup, I probably would not draft Mark Andrews, and I probably would be looking to trade him if he's on my team because he has a lot of open market value. And like I said, he is almost 28 years old at this point in time. Mid to late first rounder tier just has TJ Hawkinson in it. I think a lot of the guys behind him can climb into this tier, but as of right now, he's the only one that's both shown the production and is still, 26, 25 years old and can be very productive in the long term. I think the Vikings, if he has another productive season, will probably extend him. And that's great for him. Obviously, he wants to stay in that situation. They throw the ball a lot. He has Justin Jefferson to take away attention. Next, we get into this like mega tier of late first round tight end options with the 2 rookies, Dalton Kincaid and Michael Mayer. And then 2 guys that I think have shown quite a bit of promise so far to this point in their career, Pat Freiermuth and David Njoku. Njoku, again, also on the border of like a borderline contending asset because he is 27 years old. Freiermuth, a guy that I think is also a very good premier rebuilding asset because Kenny Pickett is still, going to be a second-year quarterback this year. There could be some growing pains, but he's shown quite a bit at this point in his career. We don't usually see tight ends produce like Pat Freiermuth over the first 2 seasons of their career, and he could absolutely explode this year. Mayer and Kincaid are obviously lotto tickets. I think Michael Mayer is one of the best tight end prospects we've ever seen, and I think the Raiders are actually quite a good landing spot for him. If Jimmy Garoppolo is indeed their quarterback, he's favored the tight end in the past. Michael Mayer is a well-rounded tight end. And then, of course, we know what the upside case is with Dalton Kincaid. If he ends up carving out a huge workload, a huge role in this Buffalo Bills offense, he can be the type of guy that really ascends in value, could eventually probably become the tight end 1 in Dynasty if he were to have a great rookie season. for Dalton Kincaid. A lot of flexibility with how they can deploy him, and we're already kind of hearing buzz about that. Next, we get into the early second rounder tier, which is Greg Dulcich and Sam Laporta. Dulcich showed a lot as a rookie. Sam Laporta is a pretty good prospect, goes to the Detroit Lions. I think both of these guys are also kind of lotto tickets, but just to a lesser extent. I think both of them could ascend in value to top 5 dynasty tight ends with what Dulcich showed as a rookie, not only getting on the field and commanding targets, but also being the primary go-to guy when they already had Albert O there established. He basically beat him out for that job as a rookie, which we don't usually see a ton from rookie tight ends. And then Sam Laporta, also this like move tight end, yards after catch type of guy, going to an offense that ranked top 5 in points per game and dealt TJ Hawkinson at the trade deadline. So they should be able to know how to use him, know how to deploy him in the slot, up the seam, whatever. So Sam Laporta, also a very intriguing, exciting name. Dalton Schultz, Cole Kmet, and Chig Okonkwo, kind of just a mixed bag here. Dalton Schultz still barely in that range, just under 27 years old right now. And then Cole Kmet, a guy that's been semi-productive at commanding targets so far this year, but the Bears were not throwing the ball last year. So a guy that could be a high upside guy if the Bears were to suddenly go pass heavy, but I don't necessarily know how likely that is. And then Chig Okonkwo is the ultimate projection on a per route, on a per target basis. You could argue that this guy was one of the best tight ends in the league last year, but he wasn't commanding a high level of volume. So hopefully that goes up. Hopefully he can command more routes and command more targets. Then we finally close this video out with the late second, early third round tier. I love Tucker Kraft. I think he's the best tight end that the Packers drafted. I know they drafted Musgrave ahead of him, but I think once we get into training camp, that'll work itself out. Noah Fant is still young enough. He's still athletic. He still has the first round pedigree. The Seahawks are running like a weird tight end by committee. Hopefully they can get Fant more involved. He also could be a guy that gets a different deal on the open market next year and goes to a new team. Hopefully he does, because he's kind of in a rough situation right now. And then Trey McBride, who was a pretty highly sought after prospect in last year's draft class, second round pick, first tight end off the board. I do think with DeAndre Hopkins now cut there, Arizona is going to be pretty much throwing to Marquise Brown and nobody else. So there's room for Trey McBride to emerge if he is a talented player, but I didn't see a ton of target earning ability, especially when Zach Ertz went down last year. I expected a little bit more out of Trey McBride. So like I said, this has been my top 15 cornerstone rankings at each position. This should aid you guys in your rebuilds to know which assets are more valuable, which assets are similarly valued. Again, use the tiers. That kind of exemplifies which assets are similarly valued. And like I said, if you want to play with this age setting, like you want to know who my best running backs under the age of 24 are on our site on Flock Fantasy, you can use the age slider there, flockfantasy.com/FSE for 30% off, 2-day free trial, 6 months for free when you sign up annually to get our rankings, to get our bonus content, plus all of your other favorite Dynasty content creators. We've all teamed up to bring you guys a great product, and we're really, really proud of what we're building over there. And this is just the start. We're going to continue adding to this thing. It is getting much, much better. So definitely check that out if you're interested. If you want to support us, go check out all of our sponsors linked down below in the description, or you can leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and comment any of your thoughts. That helps us just as well in the YouTube algorithm. Big thank you for getting us to 20,000 subscribers. We're probably going to announce a giveaway at some point this week, so definitely stay tuned for that as a thank you for getting us to 20,000 subscribers. But with that being said, peace out, and we'll talk to you soon.